In this clear casket is a wax mould of a teen boy entombed just below, and this month he'll be proclaimed the first Catholic saint of the millennial generation. Carlo died of leukemia in 2006. When he was alive, he built websites to spread his faith, and after his death, miracles were attributed to him.
The first miracle he did the day of the funeral, because a woman with a breast cancer prayed Carlo, and she had to start the chemotherapy, and the cancer disappeared completely. And since then, we had so many miracles.
Relics that are said to be of Carlo, described as parts of his clothes and even his body, have started cropping up online, some of them for sale on auction sites like eBay. The Bishop of Assisi has denounced the sales as horrible, and he's asked the police to confiscate the listed items.
You know what, I'm gonna say it. I think we're too hard on the millennials. They are so much freer than we will ever be. Our generation is so scared of being cringe that y'all are literally becoming conservatives, dressing like Mormons, not dancing in the club. Because what? You're scared of being called cringe? We're giving up our civil liberties out of fear of being cringy. I think we should let them cook.
Before offering parenting advice to your adult children, pause and ask yourself these 3 important questions. First, was I asked for this input? If parents haven't specifically asked for your opinion, they may not be open to receiving it, no matter how valuable you think it is. Second, is this about safety or preference? Safety concerns might warrant speaking up, but preferences, like how they dress the baby or which foods they introduce first, are their domain. Third, what's my real motivation? Be honest with yourself. Are you trying to be helpful, or are you trying to show your expertise, or even assert control? These 3 questions can ensure that any advice you give is truly helpful. Knowing when and how to give advice can transform your relationship with your adult children and help you become the supportive grandparent they need.
It is 1:30 in the morning in Italy, and I was having a dream about the SAVE Act, rather a nightmare about the SAVE Act, when I thought I had remembered about J.D. Vance giving a speech one time where he said that children should be issued a vote, but that vote should be controlled by their parents until they're 18 years old. And I was like, surely I am having a fever dream and I am not remembering this correctly. The SAVE Act disenfranchising largely married women is just step 1. Here's step 2.
Let's give votes to all children in this country, but let's give control over those votes to the parents of those children. Children are the future of this country, and yet the parents who have them actually have no advantage in our democratic process. They have a smaller voice in some ways than the people who don't have any children at all. When you go to the polls in this country as a parent, you should have more power. You should have more of an ability to speak your voice in our democratic republic than people who don't have kids. Now, people will say, and I'm sure the Atlantic and the Washington Post and all the usual suspects will criticize me about this in the coming days. Well, doesn't this mean that non-parents don't have as much of a voice as parents? Doesn't this mean that parents get a bigger say in how our democracy functions? Yes, absolutely.
This is from a video talking about how it's ridiculous that boomer-aged grandparents do not want to put in the effort to come visit their grandchildren, but then want to throw tantrums about why don't you ever come visit. And I think it demonstrates a fundamental disconnect in the difference between people's lived experience today and our parents' lived experiences 20, 30, 40, 50 years ago. Almost every home has a 2-parent working home. The state of infrastructure in this country is terrible. Most jobs require at least a 30 to 45 minute commute if you have to drive. Sometimes those commutes can be up to an hour depending on traffic in your area. You have to spend time getting ready for work. You have to spend time winding down when you come home from work. You've got to cook dinner. You've got to take care of weekly chores. Saturdays and Sundays are often spent with general upkeep. And then grandparents want to be like once a week, once every other week. It's like, come spend several hours at my house. Well, no, you are retired. You have exponential comparative free time. Grown-ups these days are spread thin. They are not making enough money. And for a bunch of people that have literally all the wealth, they can invest 3 hours a week in coming over and hanging out if that's what they want to do. Don't put it on people who are already so exponentially spread thin that they are barely even treading water in terms of continuing to be alive in this modern era. And then you want to guilt trip your own children about, like, I can't believe you never let me visit. Yeah, you can come over whenever you want. The problem is you want me to drive across town on my day off when I've got to play catch up for a week, after me and my spouse spend 11, 12 hours a day just in terms of managing the work day before we can even really get home and deal with everything else. No, to hell with all that.
So I do find it interesting how many Christians say that humans just have inherent value. They just inherently deserve life and to live. Just to then go support capitalism, a system where our value comes exclusively from how much we can produce, what we earn. And that's what dictates whether or not we deserve to live.
Let's talk about this a minute. I do not think you can say it was a generation. It's not a generational thing. Women have been waiting on men hand and foot, if you want to call it that, for millennia, okay? Because it's just the way it was. And it wasn't always a bad thing. The man usually went out, was what we call the breadwinner. He went out, he did all the hard work. The woman stayed at home and did all the hard work at home. And she didn't mind helping him. But there's two kinds of waiting on somebody, and the good kind is when it's reciprocated, and the person that you're waiting on hand and foot also takes care of you, cherishes you, loves you, helps you, respects you. And then there's the other kind where it's demanded of you, and if you don't do it, you get in trouble. And that's not a good kind of waiting on somebody hand and foot. But for a woman to want to do for her husband because she loves him and she respects him and she wants to take care of him, that is not a bad thing at all. And again, I don't think you can put it down to a generation. Now, my grandmother was 14 years old when she married my grandfather, and he was 7 years older than her. Yeah. They lived with her parents for a year. She waited on him. She treated him like a king, but he treated her like a princess. He respected her. He took care of her. He was a hard worker. He worked out in the fields. They were farmers. He worked in the fields. She might have done all the cooking, but he's the one that put the food on the table. And that's just the way it was. But they respected each other, and they had a wonderful relationship that went well into their old age. So, no, I don't think you can say this waiting on somebody hand and foot is a generational thing. And again, it's what you want to do. And for some people, it's what they say now is their love language. I want to help my husband. I want to wait on my husband. I wait on my husband sometimes, but you know what? He waits on me too. It's supposed to go both ways. So let's just quit talking about it like it's a bad thing. It's not a bad thing if it's done right. And again, if it's reciprocated. Now, yeah, if it's demanded and you get beat up or whatever if you don't do it, no, that ain't good. That's never good. But let's just don't lump it all into the same category, okay? Now I got to go put my hair on.
Get ready, folks. Millions of people are about to have their wages garnished due to missed student loan payments. Let's talk about it. Starting this year, the Trump administration has signaled they're going to start aggressive collection efforts on students who are behind on their student loan payments. About 10 million people will have their wages garnished up to 15% during this effort. And guys, this is scary news for people who are caught in limbo due to income-driven repayment plans being disregarded by the Trump administration. And all this on the heels of a huge economic downturn, which is seeing people lose their jobs, having their wages cut, or just losing hours altogether. And guys, no wonder this is happening. Students have been saddled with huge amounts of student debts and then offered jobs for subpar wages. There's no winning in this situation.
People aren't showing up to church because Christianity is supposed to be a community, and y'all are out here treating it like a country club. Ooh, got 'em.
I know a lot of white atheists. I don't know many black atheists, not none, just not many. I got a theory about why there's not many black atheists. Here goes. Atheism is really like the height of white privilege. It really is, because religion basically says, like, hey, can we interest you in an afterlife? And white people are like, oh, no, thank you. How much better could it be? I'll just take my supplements and see what happens, huh?
I hate when people be like, man, I don't trust science. Then you're a scientist. That's how it starts. That's all they doing. I don't trust this. Then they try it over and over and over and over and over again until somebody's like, I think we got it. That's all science is. How do you not trust trial and error going back years and years and years and years? People tell me, I don't trust science. I'm like, you need to get in there and start doing some experiments. Get you a beaker. Get you a graduated cylinder. Get you a triple beam balance. People always be like, I don't trust science. I do the research. That's the past, bro. Get in the present.
Spent hours and hours on the phone with what I now know was a corporate middleman trying to work through these applications and processes, and it was mind-numbingly complicated and difficult, and the wait times were so long, and the paperwork and the hoops that we had to jump through. And I remember feeling a lot of anger at the inefficiency of the government. The government has no incentive to perform because we're not their customer. What I realize now is that I was dealing with a corporation. I was not the customer. Iz was not the customer. My son, Henry, who needed services, was not the customer. And in fact, complicated forms and more wait times and process is actually more business for these corporate middlemen. They have an incentive to sell more paperwork to all of us. To me, that is a distortion of what Ronald Reagan dreamt about, of corporations swooping in and making our government more efficient. Okay, that's corporate middlemen. Let's move on to number 4. Medicaid dentists. Now, I've had some positive experiences with Medicaid. When I was a freshly married, in my young 20s university student with no insurance, and we had our first baby, I got hit with a $10,000 bill from the hospital and freaked out and went to the billing department at the hospital, and they told me about this magical thing called Medicaid for someone like me who was very low income at the time. And lucky for me, whoever the benefits contractor in Utah was handled it very well, and it really saved my bacon. But if you look at all sides of Medicaid, you start to see entire industries that exist to take advantage of the Medicaid system. A good example of this is dentistry.
It's created an enormous business opportunity for some dentists who see that they can make a living treating exclusively Medicaid patients.
Unlike regular private insurance, Medicaid doesn't reimburse very much for dental procedures. So because of that, a lot of dentists don't take Medicaid as an insurance. And on the other side, there are some...
AmeriCorps is the latest government agency to face major cuts. More than 2,000 people ages 18 to 26 served for nearly a year, according to the program's website, responding to natural disasters and helping with community projects across the United States. Volunteers were informed this week that their work would end early due to, quote, circumstances beyond their control, according to an email obtained by the Associated Press.
I am not kidding or exaggerating when I say that this is one of the most insane stories I have ever heard. The Doge hacker group has been sniffing around our government for a very long time now, and nobody has been certain what exactly they're looking for. It certainly isn't waste, fraud, and abuse, because if that was the case, there would have been trials in Congress. But now we have a whistleblower at the NLRB who is finally speaking up. And what they said is chilling. Basically, what Doge does when they attack a government agency is get in, obfuscate, steal data, disable security features, then get out. And shortly after, IPs from Russia with usernames and passwords that have been used by the Doge team try to get into the system. Now, this is where it gets crazy, because after this whistleblower raised his concerns to the head of the NLRB about Doge's security breaches, he was met with a note that was taped on his door that had personal information as well as overhead images likely taken from a drone of him walking his dog. These are serious allegations and come to you via NPR and the whistleblower themselves. And if true, that means that the whole Doge operation was likely just a front for Russia.
All right.
I have seen in my own city people say that things like clothing swaps and food drives and small local advocacy orgs are, and I quote, a great way to make people feel like they're doing something. I don't know how else to tell you this, but people are not going to want to revolt if they don't have food in their stomachs or clothes on their backs.
You want to know why the government went after the Black Panthers so hard? Because they were feeding people. They were clothing people. They were educating the children. They were doing everything Soul talks about in their video. And it terrified the government. See, SNCC was focused on registering voters and getting turnout at the polls and putting pressure on the laws that had been passed on the federal level, but the South was not following. And so they were organizing the lunch counter sit-ins and the freedom rides. The NAACP was focused on using the judicial system and bringing lawsuits and then doing these marches and these protests when it was time. But the Black Panthers were feeding their community. And that terrified the government. Yes, they also had guns, but it was the fact that when you build communities like that, when you build these small neighborhood communities where everyone supports each other, that means that the power structures, both governmental, but more importantly, the corporate power structures, have less control of those communities and of those people, and they do not like that. And so I would argue that these small things, that these mutual aid things and these small local advocacy groups are actually more important, or one of the most important things we can do. And so Soul talks about how all these leftists are just waiting around for the revolution. They say when it finally comes, then we'll be here and whatever. But that's not how it works. But because in order to bring that revolution on, in order to be able to break that control, you first have to get people to be less reliant on the systems that are oppressing them. And you only do that by supporting each other and doing these small things. So it's when we have these small communities all across the country that are helping each other and supporting one another, that's when the revolution can happen. Because when these communities have support, when these communities can rely on each other rather than their corporate overlords, that's when they'll start taking risk. And so it's going to be all of these small little things that start adding up so that we can make a big change.